got on a roll with that last slide and last video, and I was just going to go on through, but decided to change. Here we're going to look at objectives 4 and 5 together. 4 is explain the importance of estuaries in aquatic ecosystems, and then 5 is just key terms: wetlands, marshes, swamps, bogs, delta, lake, pond, river, stream, and coral reefs. So looking at aquatic ecosystems, we classify them as either freshwater, which is your inland water ecosystems, saltwater, your oceans and seas, and then there's brackish water that's a combination of both. Wetlands are areas that are wet for part of the year. Marshes pretty much stay wet most of the time. They can be just really inundated with a lot of water. Swamps, you'll have a lot of woody plants and shrubs of course, swamps can drain and they can have less water or more water. And then bogs, this is where you're going to have your peat deposits and that sphagnum moss that retains water so well. And the water here is going to be very acidic. And you can see you've got lakes, streams. Those would be your inland water, your fresh water. And you see different organisms you might find there. You see the salt marsh, that's going to have the brackish water in it. It's a mixture of the fresh and the salt. And then the delta is the same thing pretty much that you have there. Now, lakes. We classify lakes by what kind of nutrients and how many nutrients we find there. If they're very low productive, not many nutrients at all, we call them oligotrophic. If they are eutrophic, they have high productivity and very nutrient rich. Now, lakes will stratify or layer. In the temperate zones, they stratify in the summer and the winter, and it's a vertical stratification that you'll see. You see the oligotrophic lake at the top, it's nutrient poor, low productivity, and then down at the bottom, all that bloom that you see there, that's a eutrophic or high productivity lake. A lot of nutrients there. Now this is the lake stratification that I talked about. If you'll look up there, look at the, well, let's start over here at fall or summer stratification, okay? You see epilimnion, that's the surface water. Thermocline's in the middle, and the hypolimnion, that's the deepest water. And look at the temperature differences. Now in the fall, it'll overturn. You see how it turns over? And that picture that's on the right, and then if you go to winter stratification, the top, most of it is going to be really, really cold, 2 to 3 degrees Celsius. But most of the lake underneath that is a little bit warmer at 4 degrees Celsius. But we have a spring overturn again, and by the time we get to the summer at the top, you see you've got the 3 layers that are showing, and you see the temperature differences. Have you ever been in a lake swimming and you enter an area that's just like really cold, like around your middle or around your knees? That's what we're talking about here, that stratification that you'll see. Now, there's plankton that we find in freshwater and saltwater. It's very important. The phytoplankton part of it is the photosynthetic algae, produces a lot of the oxygen for us. And the zooplankton, that's the animals that eat the phytoplankton. The life zones, you've got the littoral zone closest to the shore, the limnetic zone where the sunlight penetrates, the profundal zone where you're not going to have any light penetration, and then down on the bottom is the benthic zone where the soil and the water interface. Now, one of the vocab terms was estuary. And the estuaries are a mix. It's brackish water. It's water that's fresh and salt water. they meet together and they mix. And so anything that lives there has got to be able to react to it being saltier at times than other times. Um, 2/3 of marine fishes and shellfish will develop in the estuaries. A lot of organisms go there to spawn or to lay their eggs, so it's referred to as the nursery of the sea. It is very nutrient rich in that area. You can see here some coastal ecosystems. There's the mangrove swamp at the top, the rocky shore, the mudflats at the top. The mangrove swamp is in the middle where you see those tree roots that are extended up above the surface. And then the rocky shore down at the bottom. Now, seashores, of course, the littoral zone lies between the high and the low tide water marks, so it's also called the intertidal zone. On rocky shores, you're going to have a lot of attached organisms that are going to have to be able to handle times when the tide's out, when there's no water on them, and then when the tide's really pounding them, where they can stay attached and tolerate that. So they've got to be able to survive in that situation. The sandy beach, of course, there's no way for attachment there, so most of the permanent residents that you find there are going to live down in the sand. Our oceans have a true light zone. It's the shallow ocean. It's the euphotic zone. Got a lot of organisms, a lot more than anywhere else in the sea. Then you have your coral reefs. These are just below the surface in shallow, warm tropical waters, and it's got a lot of life there. It's densely populated. So you can see the shallower water where the light penetrates, that's the euphotic zone, and then you get into the deeper areas. You see the intertidal, that's between the low and the high tide marks. Now, pelagic zones, this is most of the ocean's volume. It's the open sea. The epipelagic doesn't have many organic nutrients or a high concentration of phytoplankton. The mesopelagic has a high concentration of organisms because of the sunlight penetration, and this would include your coral reefs. Bathypelagic is the deepest part, and it's complete darkness, except for some that are capable of producing bioluminescence light, and your carnivores and scavengers that live there have got to be adapted to that dark, no light environment. The abyssal plain, that's down in the bottom, and it's high pressure and extreme cold. The organisms that are there that are mostly invertebrates like sea cucumbers and sea urchins and tube worms that burrow in the sand, they basically depend on debris that sinks down from above. And this abyssal plain is interrupted by mountain chains or oceanic ridges. Seawater percolates through cracks called hydrothermal vents, and it's going to reach a temperature of about 350 degrees. A lot of food chains start in these hydrothermal vents. Now, the last thing we want to talk about in this chapter is the ocean currents. Major ocean currents move the heat from the equator to the cooler parts of the biosphere. And if you look up here in the northern hemisphere, you see the Gulf Stream. That is a major ocean current. We hear about it here because it affects our weather tremendously. It warms the east coast of North America and parts of Western Europe. In the southern hemisphere, you've got another current that warms it. It's called the Humboldt Current. And it carries the cold water northward along the western coast of South America. But sometimes when the Humboldt current is not cold enough so that that water will move up, or as they say, upwell, that water will become stagnant and you'll have something called the El Nino southern oscillation that forms. And this causes a huge decline in our fisheries.